Here's another type of trig equation. Let's see what happens with this one. So we first have cosecant squared x minus 2 cosecant equals 2 minus 4 sine x. So let's transform the cosecant squared into 1 over sine squared x minus, in this case it'd be 2 times 1 over sine x, or we could write 2 over sine x equals 2 minus 4 sine x. Now we don't like this one because it has the x on the bottom. So just like always, we want to get rid of that. What could we multiply by that would get rid of all the denominators? Well, we have a sine x and a sine squared, so the least common denominator there would be sine squared of x. So if we multiply every single term by sine squared, we have 1 over sine squared times sine squared will be 1 minus 2 times sine squared times 1 over sine would be sine, one of them will reduce, equals 2 sine squared of x minus 4, and sine times sine squared would be sine cubed of x. Now we have a cubic equation. Let's move everything to one side. I'll choose the left side since that will make the leading coefficient positive. So we'll have 4 sine cubed minus 2 sine squared minus 2 sine x plus 1. We're just copying down the ones that are still on the left side equals 0. Now it may help for this just to relate it to what we've already done, to do a substitution. Let a equal sine x. So we would have 4a cubed minus 2a squared minus 2a plus 1. Now there's multiple ways you can go about doing this. One of them was our synthetic division. So what would I do? I would set up, we're going to have to determine, remember our factors of the constant would be plus or minus 1, and we'll divide that by the factors of the leading coefficient. So we'll have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 1/4. And let's see what happens with this. We know that 1 will not work because if we add them up, all the coefficients, 4 minus 2 plus 1, that does not equal 0. What else could we try? We could try -1. We would have 4, -2, -2, 1. Remember, bring down the 4. 4 times -1 is -4 times -6. Negative 6 times -1 is positive 6. Add those together, we get 4. And we get -4, -3. No, -1 doesn't work as well. Let's try positive 1/2 and see what that does. So we'll have 4 minus 2 minus 2, 1, or I should say -2. Bring down the 4 times 1/2 is 2. That will give us 0. 0 times a number would be 0. Bring that down, -2. -2 times 1/2 would be -1, and that'll give us 0. So it looks like we found our factor. So we'll have x minus 1/2 times 4a squared, 1 power less than what we started, minus 2. Equals 0. So we have x equals 1/2, and then 4a squared equals 2. So a squared equals 2 divided by 4, which would be 1/2. Now we can substitute back in. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake here. I should have put a right here. We all have that habit of just going back to x. That would have been wrong. So I put my a there. Now I need to substitute back in, so I'll have sine of x equals 1/2 and sine squared of x equals 1/2. So we'll solve this one, take the square root of both sides, so we'll have plus or minus square root of 1/2, which rationalizes to root 2 over 2. Now let's put our unit circle. Remember, sine on the unit circle is our y value. Y equals 1/2 would be this line. We have two solutions with that. X equals pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. Over here, we would have another unit circle. Y equals square root of 2 over 2. We know that's about 0.7, so it's a little bit higher up, something like there, and a little bit lower down because it's the negative. Here's the positive square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. And if we do a semi-decent job about it, you can kind of see this is close to that middle. So we'll have, for this one, the top one, we get pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. And then for the bottom one, negative root 2 over 2, we'll have 5 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. And that would be it. Let's take a look. We can go back here and see, is there another way we could have done this? And the answer to that is, I think so. Let's put a line down and we'll redo this. Instead of using synthetic division, this looks like we could have factored. What would the greatest common factor here be? It would be 2a. 2a times 2a squared minus, actually 2a squared would be that common factor. So let me erase that. So 2a squared times 2a minus 1. And now we have a 2a minus 1. And over here, this last part, we have negative 2a plus 1. So we can factor out a negative from that to get the same factor as we had in the first one. Now we have this common factor of 2a minus 1. So we have 2a minus 1 times 2a squared, and then the coefficient of this parenthesis would be negative 1. Now, at first glance, that looks different than this, but when we solve this parenthesis, the first one, we get a equals 1/2, and if we solve the second one, we have 2a squared equals 1, or a squared equals 1/2, which is the exact same thing we had over here. And for the rest of this is the exact same as what we came up with. So we have solutions of negative, or x equals pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, and then pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4.